It's good to have all of you here, and MCEC is truly honored to have with us today the former Secretary of the Army, the Honorable Pete Geren, who has been a lifelong champion for military families. I have the privilege of introducing an outstanding college student who will introduce Secretary Geren, Abigail Griffin. She is MCEC's Policy and Student Programs intern, a rising senior at the University of Texas at Austin, studying government. And it says a lot about her. We'd have a Texas Aggie saying good things about a University of Texas Longhorn. Abigail is studying government in Middle Eastern languages and cultures and began her work at MCEC this past February. She has been raised in an Army-strong family, living in 9 different states throughout her father's 28-plus year career in the Army. Her parents and younger brother live in Kentucky, and Abigail loves, in addition to everything else she's doing at school, she loves playing and competing in sports, travel, and quality family time. At this time, please give a warm MCEC welcome to Miss Abigail Griffin.
Thank you, Mr. Edwards, and good morning, everyone. Yes, as he mentioned, I am a senior at the University of Texas at Austin. I am also an Army brat. Hook 'em, any more? Yep, all right. I am a rising senior, and I am an Army brat. I've lived all over the country. I've played for just an insane number of different soccer teams. I went to 2 different high schools, 3 different middle schools, and military service has just run in my family. For generations, I have had family members who have served in the Marine Corps, the Air Force, the Navy, and the Army. My younger brother is the battalion commander of his high school JROTC. My father has served 29 years in the Army and is continuing his long career for probably several more years because of how much he loves it. I myself have also considered joining the military. So my life up to going to college has been defined by my father's career in the Army. But my life in college has been defined by the man that you're about to hear speak to you this morning. I am a senior at the University of Texas at Austin, and I'm also a senior 40-acre scholar, which is the full-ride, merit-based scholarship through the Texas X's, which is the alumni network of the University of Texas. That means, I will have the opportunity to graduate my undergrad career debt-free. But more than that, it means that I have had so many incredible opportunities because the Honorable Pete Geren is my scholarship donor. I have gotten to intern at the State Department on Capitol Hill, and I am standing here in front of you today, and I have gotten the incredible experience to intern for MCEC because of this 40-acre scholars program. My college career has been defined by him, and it is my ultimate honor and privilege to be up here to thank and introduce former Secretary of the Army, U.S. Representative, and distinguished alum from the UT Austin, Mr. Pete Geren.
Abigail, thank you so much for that introduction, and thank you for the life of service that you have lived. Listening to her introduction this morning, it reminded me of an early speech I gave back early days as a politician. I had to follow Ann Richards. And I would have been better off if I'd have just thanked Governor Richards and sat down. I tried to joke, nobody laughed, and stumbled through the rest of my talk. But to follow the young woman, a young leader that radiates so much confidence and lived a life of accomplishment, a tough act to follow. Abigail, thank you for that introduction, and thank you for your... And Chet, thank you for your comments. And Chet and I have had the opportunity to work together many, many years. And those of you who've been a part of the Fort Hood community, or those of you who've really been involved at any installation anywhere in our country, your life has been touched by the work of Chet Edwards. There are hospitals that have been renovated and built around this country because of his leadership when he was in the Congress. And he was bucking long odds in those efforts, because there were many people in the department and actually in the Congress that pushed back against those efforts. And there are at least 3 brand new hospitals serving our military families that wouldn't exist hadn't been for your work. Chet, thank you so much. Well, thank you all just like the Colonel said, thank you all for having me today. And the first thing I want to say is thank you to MCEC for all you do for our military kids, our military families. Mary Keller asked me to talk today about a task force that I had the opportunity to serve on that produced a report that made the connection between K-12 public education and national security. And she also asked me to talk about some of my experiences as Secretary of the Army and how important I saw that the education of our military kids was to the success of our all-volunteer force. I'm going to try to weave those two together, but in fact they are inseparable. But first, let me talk about this task force. Important initiative by the Council on Foreign Relations. It was chaired by former Secretary of State Condoleezza Rice and Joel Klein, who had been the superintendent of the New York Public Schools. The task force was charged with exploring the linkage between education and national security. I'm certainly not an expert on public education, but when I had the privilege of working for our soldiers and Army families as Secretary of the Army, I saw firsthand the impact that the quality of America's education has on the quality of America's Army. An Army that draws all of its soldiers from our citizenry, and they're all volunteers. They're all volunteers. They all chose to be a part of our Army. And they come from the most accomplished of our young people. I saw its impact on recruiting, retention, and training, and I gained an appreciation for the training and technology that gives our soldiers an edge over our adversaries and sets our military apart from the rest of the world today. And we do have an edge today. Our edge is over our friends, the most advanced other military powers in the world, over our competitors and our adversaries. And that's an edge that was developed over generations, in which the United States led the rest of the world in any measure you could name for academic or intellectual achievement. The question that was posed to our task force was, will we retain that edge if we remain where we are today? It's not at the top of those international rankings. We're in the middle of the pack. Can we retain that edge if we stay in the middle of the pack? The task force examined that question and offers a deeply troubling answer. And the issue is much broader than soldiers in the field, but the challenge that threatens that edge also threatens the underpinnings of our nation's security and the world's security, in fact, if we as a nation end up as a diminished power. Despite the disparate backgrounds and opinions of the members of the task force, and it included people from all walks of life, the group was unanimous in its conviction that the strength and influence of the United States are inextricably linked to education. The domestic consequences of a weak educational system are relatively well known by now, but the task force went beyond the exploration of those issues as an issue of soft power and tried to make the direct connections, which were not hard to make, with national security. Before I discuss the task force findings and recommendations, I want to set the scene by taking a look at the current state of our nation's education system. K-12 public education system specifically. The task force concluded that it is not hyperbole to say that we are in the midst of an education crisis. The United States currently spends about $700 billion a year on public education. And for state governments, it's the largest expenditure. I've seen different reports, but no report ranks the United States lower than third in the world on the amount we spend per student in our public education system. The results we are experiencing today do not reflect that level of investment. As a country, we don't tend to think of ourselves as middle of the pack in anything. According to the results of the recent international assessment, the United States does not crack the top 10 of industrialized nations in the world in reading, math, or science. We're not in the top 10. Indeed, students show that while students in other nations, and if you look over the last 10 years, you will see dramatic progress among many of those nations, we're not seeing that here. On a national level, according to the most recent NAEP progress report, only 1/3 of our elementary and middle school students are demonstrating competency or better in reading, math, and science exams. 1/3. Our children are not receiving a comprehensive education. Successfully educating our young people about our country, our governmental institutions, and American values is critical to the existence of an informed citizenry and a strong democracy. That same NAE report said that only 1/4 of American students are proficient in civics. There's a lack of global awareness and foreign language capability among our students. 80% of our students speak one language. High school graduation rates, while improving, are still far too low. And I know from the work I do now in a foundation that works a great deal in education, in public education, so many of the numbers we see on graduation rates greatly overstate the number of kids who actually graduate. Right now, about 25% of our kids fall off somewhere along the way before getting a high school diploma. And Dr. Chisholm talked about the importance and the goal of ESSA of being college-ready, career-ready. I'm about to give you a number that I think you'll find terribly disturbing, and it's one that in the foundation work I do today, it's one that we're focused on. The ACT, the organization that offers one of the college admittance tests, familiar to all of you, I'm sure. Through last year, they concluded that only 22% of the kids that graduate from our high schools are college ready by a very low standard on their scoring on the ACT exam. This figure drops to single digits among our most disadvantaged populations. In Dallas-Fort Worth, I'm very familiar with the school systems in that area. We have many schools. In fact, many of our biggest schools in that area, where that number is 2%, 1%. So you see 100 kids go across that stage, 1 is college ready, or 2 is college ready. We've got a big hill to climb. As Secretary of Army during the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan, which continue to this day, the longest wars in American history, I saw that the paucity of high school graduates threatened our ability to meet the recruiting goals necessary to man our force. And education is only part of the problem. I think many of us are surprised to learn that of males aged 17 to 24, only 25% of them are eligible to join the Army today. The 25% is the same population that industry wants to hire. So the competition is great for that 25%. And that means 75% can't join the Army, 75% can't join the military, and that 75% is out looking for a job, carrying around the burden of an education that did not prepare him or her for this century. And among those who do join the military, the Military Battery of Vocational Tests, ASVAB. Year in, year out, something like 30% of that 25% don't score high enough on the ASVAB to join the military. In the Army, there's a saying that we never want to send our soldiers into a fair fight. It is a saying that reflects an underlying moral imperative. It's truly a matter of life and death. It is our duty as Americans to ensure that our soldiers are better educated, better trained, and better equipped than an adversary that they will meet in the field. And today they are. The quality of our soldiers and the quality officer ranks, NCO ranks, we dwarf the military in almost any other country in the world when it comes to our capabilities. Our soldiers have technology at their fingertips that set them apart from most militaries around the world. We're fond of saying our soldiers own the night. Will we be able to say that 10 years from now if we stay in the middle of the pack internationally? It's a question we're going to learn, and we may learn it the hard way. Also learned that a lack of national standards and uniform quality in education affects both military recruitment and retention. And this is where MCEC comes in a big way. We've got soldiers that, and their families that 1 year at Fort Polk, Louisiana, maybe next year in Hawaii, maybe next year in Washington, D.C. I have a friend who was a senior NCO, 30 years in the Army. When he was stationed at Fort Polk, his 3 kids were served so poorly by the school they were in. When he moved to D.C., he had all of his children repeat the grades that they had just experienced in Louisiana. Absolutely unacceptable. The many other arms of the government that are responsible for our nation's security also are imperiled by the failures of our education system. It's essential that we provide a certain base of knowledge for students in order to produce citizens who can serve effectively in the Foreign Service. I was pleased that Abigail told me that one of the things she's considering, maybe a career in the military, but maybe a career in the Foreign Service. We need well-prepared and outstanding, idealistic young people to choose those careers. Yet, recent tests show that significant majorities of our young people, because of their educational shortcomings, have really foreclosed those career options. We face a critical language shortage in our Foreign Service, specifically in languages that are so critical to where we are operating today. Languages such as Mandarin, Dari, Korean, Russian, and Turkish. We're way short of what we need. The defense industry, 63% of the defense industry reports that they are unable to fill the jobs that they need in their high-tech industrial operations. In spite of high unemployment in many parts of the country, 63% cannot fill the jobs. It is clear that the state of our current education system has tangible, palpable, measurable consequences for our national security. The task force found that this weakness also stunts our economic competitiveness globally, threatening long-term our ability to serve as the dominant force on the world stage. Globalization and the technological sophistication of our economy are widening already troubling socio and economic divides, rewarding those who have the right skills and leaving behind those that don't. In 1960, 60% of America's jobs were open to people who did not have a college diploma, did not have a high school diploma, 60%. For new jobs today, it's less than 10%. And more jobs are requiring a post-secondary credential. In fact, just in the last 10 years, that number has edged above 50%. The federal government predicts that the U.S. economy will add more than 20.5 million jobs between the years 2010 and 2020. Most of those jobs will require specialized skills in post-secondary education. In 2020, there will be 6 million more high school dropouts than jobs available to them. There will be a shortfall of up to 1.5 million workers to fill jobs requiring at least a bachelor's degree. 1.5 million good jobs going unfilled. Today, despite high employment, a survey conducted by the Business Roundtable found that more than 60% of employers across all industries, not just the defense industry, are unable to fill their workforces. Human capital has never been more important for success in our increasingly competitive world economy. And the key to quality human capital is quality education. I've offered you some of the facts that draw the linkage between education and national security. But I want to take a minute to explore another theme of our report. Draw a linkage that includes but goes beyond national security. And that is the linkage between quality education and the fabric of life in America. Ultimately, that becomes a matter of national security as well. And this is an issue that Chet Edwards and I have talked about on many occasions. As a people, we're not bound by blood or ethnicity or religion. We are connected by the core belief in the American dream. The belief it does not matter where you came from or where you started. Your future is yours to shape. A belief that your children will have it better than you. There was a day, and it was not long ago, when the road to the American dream didn't require that much education. Good health, good work ethic, and a strong back. Not so today and less so tomorrow. The future depends upon a quality education. A recent Gallup poll, and I'm sure many of you have seen it, shows that a majority of people today do not believe that their children's lives will be better than theirs. That's a big change in America. The fabric is fraying. If the American dream becomes an American memory, our domestic security, our national security crumbles from within and ultimately from without. The future for a poorly educated America is bleak, and the future for an America that does not educate its children is perilous. And a world without a strong America is more perilous still. The chairman of the Federal Reserve years ago, Alan Greenspan, once said that if we don't solve the problem of America's K through 12 public education, nothing else is going to matter all that much. I believe that he's right. There's a great deal at stake. The task force conclusions may sound alarmist, but the task force went on to identify some encouraging trends across the country. And I won't walk you through all of those recommendations, but many of those are reflected in the new ESSA legislation. Many of those are encapsulated in the push for Common Core. It shouldn't matter if you're born in Mississippi or Massachusetts. It shouldn't matter if you're stationed at Fort Polk or at Fort Myer. You ought to be able to count on a quality education for your kids. And we cannot let the students of Louisiana be left behind in this economy. We cannot let the military families who are stationed in Louisiana be left behind. And this realization is becoming more understood, and policymakers are acting on it more and more. But I thought Mr. Cohen's point that he made, you can't count on it happening by itself. You can't count on it happening because there's a law. You can't count on it happening because there is a regulation. It's going to require work at the grassroots level. It's going to require you as MCEC folks in these communities to demand that those school boards give our kids the best. Demand that those school boards take responsibility and require of themselves accountability. It just will not happen because the government says so. The military student identifier, that wouldn't have happened if it had not been for MCEC advocacy. That's one of the many, many great contributions MCEC has made to improving the lives of military kids. And the database that's going to come out of that is going to provide us so many important insights and provide us with data that will allow us to be more targeted and be more effective in meeting the needs of military kids. That's information and data we had not had previously. The United States must compete globally. But for all of us, our task, what we can do to increase the chances that we continue to dominate globally, it happens at the local level. It happens through organizations like MCEC. It happens through young people like Ms. Griffin, or student to student that Chet and I had a chance to visit with those members last night. It happens when you, as a leader in the community at Fort Hood, go to that school board and say, you've got to recognize the needs of these kids. General Haston talking about advocating for National Guard and Reserve children. It doesn't just happen. You can't presume that people that don't study this, that don't experience this like you, are going to have those needs represented in policy at the local level. And MCEC has done so many things, individually with kids, as advocates for kids, that have made a huge difference in the lives of our military kids. Made a huge difference, as General Haston pointed out, in military readiness. But we've got to be creative, we've got to be innovative, and we've got to see it as an effort that requires our personal involvement at the grassroots level. Shelley, could I ask you to pull up a slide? I've got just one slide. And if you don't remember anything I said today, and following Abigail, you probably won't, I would like you to remember this image. Pete Schoonmaker, when he was Chief of Staff of the Army, had that hanging in his office. And it's an image that sticks in my mind. I can't think about the military today without thinking about that guy. And he represents men and women in our military. In fact, he represents the families in our military. We are in the 15th year, 16th year of the longest war in American history. Longest war in American history. Our military is filled with people who've deployed 4, 5, 6 times. Our military is filled with children who've experienced the absence of parents much of their childhood. Our military is filled with kids whose parents have been maimed for life. Our military has, the children in our military, in the numbers are in the thousands, have lost a parent, or lost a brother, lost a sister, lost a mom, lost a dad. And it's an all-volunteer force, as I noted earlier. No draft anymore. And I loved what General Haston said. If the military had wanted you to have a family, it would have issued you one. You go back to before World War II, if you were an enlisted person in the Army and you got married, you couldn't re-enlist. The Army is not, it is better today than it was 20 years ago, but it does not work as it should for Army families. There's a saying in the Army, if you recruit the soldier, you retain the family, and I believe that's true. But the all-volunteer force will only work if we figure out how to make the military work for the family, make the military work for the working spouse, make the military work for soldiers and their spouses that have high aspirations for their children, have high expectations for the education of their children. When I was Secretary of the Army, we were losing a lot of young soldiers that were 27, 28, 29 years old. They were going out of the service. A lot of reasons, partly just the demands of a deployment after deployment after deployment. But as we interviewed many of them, over and over we heard, my kids are 7, 8, 9. I don't want them to have to live with the instability of going from one school system to the next school system to the next school system. Made the same decision so many of us have made when we decide where we're going to live, where we're going to take a job. Will you have the educational opportunity there for your kids? I know when I moved to Washington, first question the realtor asked us, do you have kids? I said, well, we do. We've got 3 school-age kids. She said, well, the only school districts you want to, the only neighborhoods you'd want to consider are X, Y, and Z. And that, as a person with high aspirations for my kids, was a determiner. Well, our soldiers, sailor, airmen, and Marines, those that are drawn from the top 25% of our population, they feel exactly the same way. So we have got to make the military work for military families. We've got to make the educational system work for military kids, or as Abigail referred to herself, for military brats, Army brats in her case. We've got to make it work. And I believe what Mr. Cohen said. We can't wait on Washington to do it. I noted MCEC's involvement in the military student identifier. Major step forward. And the advocacy at the national level has to continue. The advocacy at the state level has to continue. And MCEC did some great work in the early part of this century in trying to get the state governments to allow better transfer of credits from state to state to state as those kids have moved. That advocacy is critically important. But student-to-student initiatives are critically important. That mentoring, that tutoring that one of the speakers earlier talked about today, critically important. Helping a kid while mom or dad, or in some cases both, are overseas. Making sure that the counselors at those schools understand, you've got military kids here, and 25 of them parents are deployed. You need to know that, and you need to do something about it. Making sure the school boards understand that. And those are the things that MCEC does so well. Those are the things that are life-changing. And I am so pleased to have the opportunity to come before you today and thank you for that work. I love what Dr. Biden asked. What are you going to do to take it to the next level? We can never stop, and I know you won't stop. I'd love to see the list of the things that you all have decided that you're going to do to take it to the next level. Because it's going to be that individual commitment, that individual creativity, that individual imagination that is going to solve problems that we haven't solved previously. If they were easy, they'd already been fixed. That was George Casey used to tell me that as we struggled with some issue and you want to just throw up your hands and think we can't do it. And General Casey reminded us always, if it was easy, somebody else already would have done it. Well, the challenges that we face in making sure our military kids have the education they deserve, our military families have the support they deserve, and our all-volunteer force is successful, is going to come with individual efforts. Putting your arms around those kids, put your arms around those families, and make it work for them. Well, MCEC, thank you for your great work. Thank you for letting me be a part of it. And I look forward to watching your next 20 years as you continue to build on the success and add to the list, add to the numbers of the lives you've changed through your work over these first 20 years. God bless you for what you do.
Please welcome back to the stage Dr. Mary Keller, the Honorable Chet Edwards, and Miss Abigail Griffin.
Abigail, do you want to get one?
Thank you.